Everyone knows why ancient Egyptians made mummies. They wanted to stop dead bodies from decaying forever, right? Well, not exactly. Preserving the body was important, but that wasn't the ultimate goal. Ancient Egyptians believed death wasn't necessarily the end of a person's existence. The mummy was actually part of something much bigger, a plan to help the dead live again in the afterlife. And once you understand that, some of the stranger things Egyptians did to their dead suddenly make sense. Ancient Egyptians believed that different parts of a person continued after death. The physical body still mattered because it remained connected to the person's identity and existence. So the dead had to remain recognizable. That's why Egyptians developed mummification. Egypt's environment may have helped them discover preservation in the first place. Bodies buried in shallow graves could naturally dry in the hot desert sand. Later, Egyptians developed much more sophisticated ways to recreate that preservations artificially. They removed organs, dried the body using a natural salt called natron, treated it with oils and resins, and carefully wrapped it in linen. But then they did something that sounds completely backwards to us today. During mummification, several internal organs were removed, and usually so was the brain. The brain could be extracted through the nose, and wasn't preserved inside the body in the way we might expect. But the heart was normally left behind. Why? Because ancient Egyptians considered the heart incredibly important. They associated it with thought, memory, character, and the person's identity. And according to their beliefs, the dead would eventually need the heart for one of the most important moments of their entire afterlife. According to Egyptian religious beliefs, after death the deceased faced judgment. Their heart could be placed on one side of a scale. On the other, the feather of Ma'at representing truth and order. If the person had lived properly, the heart would pass the test. But if it failed, there was something waiting nearby. Amet, a terrifying creature that looked like a crocodile, a lion, and a hippopotamus. Amet could devour the heart. And that meant something far worse than simply dying. It threatened the person's hope of continuing into the afterlife. That's why the famous Egyptian image of waiting of the heart wasn't simply artwork. It represented one of the most important moments Egyptians believed awaited them after death. And that's what changes the entire story of Egyptian mummies. The mummy wasn't created simply because Egyptians were obsessed with preserving dead bodies. Preservation was a means to an end. They also placed protective amulets with the dead. They provided spells and religious texts. Food and possessions could be placed inside tombs. And rituals were performed to prepare the deceased for continued existence. Everything had a purpose. The body was preserved because the dead still needed it. The heart remained because it could face judgment. And the tomb wasn't simply somewhere to leave a corpse. It was preparation for another existence. So, the biggest misconception about Egyptian mummies isn't that Egyptians wanted to preserve the dead. They did. It's why they wanted to preserve them. A mummy wasn't supposed to present the end of someone's story. For ancient Egyptians, it was supposed to help begin the next one. Follow the world you never knew, hidden truths, for more history hiding behind the stories we thought we knew.